In 2002, fear struck the streets of southwest London.
She'd suffered one severe blow to the back of her head.
He took lives like that.
A cold-blooded killer was stalking his prey.
We had a long alleyway behind our house. That was one of his hunting grounds.
Striking at defenceless young women.
He was absolutely certain to have killed again. Someone had to stop him.
But who was behind these twisted attacks?
He is out of control with the amount of anger and rage that he has internally. He just wants to hurt everybody.
Was murder his destiny? Was he born to kill? Walton-on-Thames, on the southwestern borders of London, is a prized destination for city commuters who are attracted by its proximity to the capital and its family-friendly environment. For one schoolgirl, March the 21st, 2002, had been like any other spring day.
Millie was on her way home from school. She'd met some friends at a cafe. She walked across the road from the cafe to a bus stop where her friend was going to get on the bus.
All but a small section of Millie's walk home was covered by video surveillance.
She did not appear on the videotape surveillance, the CCTV footage. In other words, in a period of about, give or take, 20 yards, she disappeared in a puff of smoke.
Everyone said Millie was a feisty, strong-willed girl. She wouldn't probably have been easily duped into getting into a car unless it was someone she knew or whatever.
She didn't make contact with her family. She didn't call any of her friends. She didn't respond to calls to her mobile from friends.
Millie Dowler was last seen around Walton-on-Thames station. Her disappearance sparked a police investigation on a national scale. Today, that disappearance was described as every parent's worst nightmare. The 13-year-old in school uniform vanished a few minutes after 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
As the residents of Walton reeled from the apparent abduction, just 13 miles away in West Drayton, 34-year-old Levi Bellfield and his 23-year-old girlfriend Emma were performing a good deed.
They are house-sitting for a friend who's on holiday. Levi goes out of the house during the daytime, comes back at about 11 o'clock at night with some beer and a takeaway. They eat the takeaway, go to bed, and about 3 o'clock he says, "I can't sleep, I'm going back to the flat," and he gets up and goes back to the flat.
The flat he visited was an apartment belonging to Emma in Walton-on-Thames. When she returned there 3 days later, she would feel compelled to question Bellfield's behaviour.
She realises that the bedding's all been removed from their bed, and she said to Levi, "Well, what happened with the bed?" He said, "Oh, the dog who he took with him made a mess on the bed and I had to throw the bedding away." And then it was, "But hang on a minute, where's my car?" "Oh, well, I went for a drink over with somebody in West Drayton and I had too much to drink, so I got a taxi home. We'll have to go back and get it." So they then get a taxi over to wherever it was, and the car's not there.
Emma's car would never be found. Despite Bellfield's secretive demeanour, the couple would set up home at Little Benty in West Drayton. Former neighbour Guido Lavorini recalls his first impressions of Bellfield.
See the house on the left there, the wee picket fence, was where we lived. Levi lived next door. Initially, he was very accommodating, very helpful, very polite, approachable. You know, if somebody says to him, "Levi, any chance you move your car?" because he would do it, and all the rest of it. So he kind of fitted in to start off with.
But it soon became apparent that Levi was anything but a considerate neighbour.
There was an elderly couple that lived at the end of Little Benty that he was quite abusive towards. At one time, you know, it's a suspicion, but we'd kill her all over the old man's garden, and that was his pride and joy, you know. He stole gates from houses further on in order to put gates in his back garden, you know. It went from there to having 2 dogs in the back shed that weren't people-friendly, to putting barbed wire on the fences. I don't know what he was trying to achieve, I don't know what he was hiding, but it was all very strange.
Guido would also develop a sense of unease about his neighbour's home life.
Up front, they played the part of a couple, happy couple and all that, but Emma's whole demeanour told a different picture. I think Emma was very fearful. I think Levi bullied her. She cried quite a lot. You know, a happy person doesn't do that.
Bellfield's previous partner, Johanna Collings, had experienced a similar trajectory in their relationship.
When I was first pregnant with my daughter, he was absolutely over the moon. Then it changed because he already had girls with his previous partner, and he'd always wanted a boy. So it kind of went downhill from there. Levi's mood swings went from absolutely loving and really nice 1 minute, and literally like you've turned a light switch on. When you cook dinner, he'd like the food placed in a certain way, like the peas would have to be separate from the potato and whatever else you had. And you had to cut it all up for him. And he'd make you try a bit of everything because he was convinced I was trying to poison him. He'd make you sleep on the floor naked, wouldn't allow you to have any bedclothes. One night he made me sit on a stool all night in the bedroom. And he always made you feel so bad that it was your fault.
As the summer of 2002 drew to a close, the residents of Walton-on-Thames received shocking news. 6 months after her disappearance, the body of schoolgirl Millie Dowler had been discovered.
She wasn't found until September 2002 in some woods out in Hampshire, and she'd obviously been there some time because of the state of her remains.
She was simply dumped naked. It was pitiless, absolutely pitiless.
As investigators desperately searched for a lead, they were unaware that the killer had developed a taste for murder, and young women would continue to be his prey. During September 2002, the body of a 13-year-old schoolgirl was found in rural Hampshire. Millie Dowler had disappeared 6 months earlier from a bus stop in Walton-on-Thames. The historic suburb of Hampton lies just 6 miles away on the north bank of the river. The 4th of February 2003 was a typical Tuesday night. The rush hour had long since passed as a young student made her way home.
Marsha MacDonald was 19 and she lived with her family in a house in Hampton in Middlesex. She had been to the cinema with a friend and caught a late-night bus home.
Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton recalls Marsha's movements.
Marsha was on a 111 bus from Kingston Town Centre, came to this bus stop here, which is the nearest to her home.
It's a little after 11:30 at night. She gets off the bus, turns left, turns right into her road. Her parents live about 120 yards up.
While she was walking along, she hadn't a care in the world. Everything was normal. Somebody walked up behind her and struck her the most fearful blow. The blow was so savage.
There was no eyewitness. There was no forensic evidence.
It was as if she'd been struck by lightning.
Marsha tragically died the following day. Police were baffled by her brutal murder. They only had one lead to pursue.
From the CCTV on the bus, we know that at the precise time she was getting off the bus, the CCTV shows their silver Vauxhall Corsa. And we saw the car go down to the crossroads and just pull into the mouth of the junction on the left. We then lose the pictures because the bus has driven away.
Police would struggle to identify the mystery vehicle and establish a motive behind the bus stop killer's ferocious attack.
Hitting someone with a blitz attack is about power, control, and that particular mode of attacking his victims satisfies something psychological in him. They are about overpowering somebody and feeling like you're the one in charge.
While the residents of Hampton reeled from the brutal murder, 34-year-old Levi Bellfield was working as a nightclub doorman in the surrounding suburbs.
He wouldn't take any nonsense. He loved fighting. And because also he worked on the doors of quite a few pubs and clubs, he was known that way, and he was, I think you could say, persuasive. He always got what he wanted.
He was a big chap, very broad, tying down to very thin legs. He just swaggered as if he owned the place.
But the local man from Isleworth hadn't always been such an imposing figure.
He was a weakling as a boy. He was a very tiny, rather peely-wally child on whom his mother doted. She wiped his bottom until he was 12. He was a mummy's boy in every sense.
He was still sleeping in her bed when he was 16. You know, and even his mum told me one day, she said, "Oh no, Levi always, if he stays here, he always sleeps in my bed." I think, hang on a minute, he's in his 30s.
Sometimes when you have very tight family bonds, there are inappropriate things that go along with that. There's a great deal of trespass in intimate ways that don't necessarily have to be physical. The trespass can be psychological.
While the mother and son's relationship appeared unusual, Bellfield's early sexual encounters were rumoured to be even more extraordinary.
There's the story of what he did to his sister's rabbit when he was about 14 or 15. Rumour has it that he had sex with the rabbit and then broke its neck.
Such rumours would single him out with his classmates.
He did get bullied by girls. They used to call him Bugsy.
Almost every person had some embarrassing situation that happened to them growing up. Most people will never forget that if they live to be 150. Now, just try to imagine what your emotional state would be like if you got teased and bullied and ridiculed on a daily basis. The amount of hatred that is built up in some individual is really off the charts.
A year had passed since the brutal bus stop murder of Marsha McDonnell in Hampton. The Blitz killer was still on the loose in southwest London.
Kate Sheedy was an 18-year-old student who was on her way home late one night.
She'd been out with her friends from school, been to a few pubs and bars, and had eventually got her bus home. Kate got off and was walking down this side of the road towards her home. She was aware that there was a vehicle parked up in front of her.
There was something about the way the car had braked quickly to a halt and swerved up onto the pavement that alerted her to danger.
And she thought, I don't like this. I just don't know what it is, don't like the look of this. So she crossed the road kind of diagonally.
Despite Kate's actions, the bus stop killer would not be denied.
He probably felt from that a sense of her being better than him, her disdain or her thinking that he was somebody she didn't want to be around, and so he wanted to teach her a lesson.
As she got on our right over here to cross this road, that was when the vehicle pulled out, and this was where Kate was run over.
The driver then put it into reverse and ran her over again.
And then went forwards again and drove off back in the direction which he'd come from. She suffered horrific injuries. She had every rib broken, her spleen was ruptured, spinal damage.
For a long period, she hung between life and death. There was a real doubt as to whether she survived this attack.
Despite her injuries, Kate would eventually pull through. As her strength returned, so did her memory. She was able to recall some details of the assailant's vehicle.
It was a big people carriage shed. It was white and had blacked out windows. And she remembered that the driver's door mirror was broken.
The van had been captured on surveillance, but was not spotted due to an administrative error. As police leads went cold, a local club doorman would remain under their radar. However, Levi Bellfield was no stranger to violence.
When he used to start rocking from side to side, you knew he was about to explode. And the guys at the club would phone me sometimes, go, Joe, get up here because he's about to lose it. I was one of the ones that, could sort of intervene and almost bring the red mist back down to a slightly peachy colour.
Bellfield's unpredictable rage had first surfaced during his teenage years as he went through a radical metamorphosis.
He went on a serious weightlifting steroid course, transforming himself from a small, fairly skinny boy into a 20-stone man with a 19.5-inch neck.
Well, without a doubt, steroid use and abuse can certainly result in aggression. They call it roid rage. Coupled with his own background of deep inadequacy and anger and hatred that was just enormous within him.
Bellfield would also abuse his position of power whilst working the nightclub doors.
Basically, my understanding of it was that if he could bully or dominate a female, then that was easy game for him. He kind of said to me, well, normally we kind of stay behind and we chat up a few of the girls and have a few drinks and all that. And maybe have a sexual encounter with him. I just turned and I said, look, I'm not interested.
Had a room upstairs in which he would take the girls, all of whom he insisted were begging for it, and abuse them sexually. He had a people carrier which he decked out with a bed in the back and purple windows so that no one could see in, and odd lighting, which he would again drive them round to take advantage of them.
As the predatory Bellfield cruised the local streets, the leafy suburbs of southwest London would be rocked by another horrific crime. 3 months after the brutal hit-and-run attack on Kate Sheedy, the bus stop killer struck again. Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton recalls the moment he heard the news.
It was early in the morning. I was at home and had a call saying there was a girl who'd been beaten to death on Twickenham Green. Little was known really at the time, other than that it appeared to be a stranger attack.
The body was that of 22-year-old Amélie de la Grange.
Amelie's body was found here about 2/3 of the way across the cricket pitch towards that big tree over there. She'd suffered one severe blow with something heavy and blunt to the back of her head, and she died very shortly afterwards. Amélie de la Grange was a 22-year-old girl. She came from a small village just into Picardy in France.
She was a language student and she'd come to England to study for a couple of years. And she was living in a very nice part of southwest London, not an area that would generally be thought of as a dangerous place to be.
Amélie had been out for an evening with friends in the local town. She'd chosen to take the bus home. It's thought she'd dozed off and missed her stop.
She asked the driver of her bus how long it would be for a bus back in the opposite direction. He said it would be about 10 minutes, and she obviously thought it was a nice evening and she'd walk back because it wasn't very far.
She gets to the corner of Twickenham Green. You can see the street lights. She knows where she's going. She's only got to cross the green.
And somewhere as she crossed that field, somebody walked up from behind her and attacked her with massive brute force.
The attack bore a marked similarity to the murder of Marsha MacDonald. She too had been killed by a blow to the head.
So now we've got a triangle of murder. We've got Millie Dowler abducted in Walton-on-Thames, Marsha MacDonald murdered at Hampton, and then Amélie de la Grange murdered at Twickenham, again within 3 or 4 miles of those other 2 locations.
These sorts of attacks were in themselves very unusual, these sort of blitz attacks, stranger attacks on lone females, and to have this sort of spike of them in this rather small and normally quite quiet part of London was remarkable.
The suburbs that had suffered such heinous violence continue to be patrolled by 34-year-old Levi Bellfield. Between 2002 and 2004, the suburbs of southwest London suffered a spate of brutal attacks on young women. The killing of Amélie de la Grange in Twickenham had established a triangle of murder in the capital. As detectives strived to establish a lead, local resident Levi Bellfield prowled the streets with his latest business venture.
Wheel clamping, that was where he suddenly thought that was the future, and that was where he could make good money, and so he went into that.
He goes along, he stuffs a clamp on someone's car, could be perfectly legally. When the bloke comes back and says, here, what's that? He says, well, I'll take it off if you give me 400 quid.
It suited him perfectly because it involved cars, it involved intimidation, it involved violence, and he could intimidate people into paying up quite easily, and he did.
Ex-partner Johanna Collings recalls another of Bellfield's ploys to generate cash.
He'd put an advert in a local paper for a brothel, and people ringing up, obviously to book the escorts, and he'd tell them an address and where to park. They would then go and park in the car park and then walk out and go to the address, which obviously didn't exist. By the time they'd come back to the car park, he'd clamp their cars.
He didn't put an ad in the paper to come get free fishing equipment or sports equipment. No, he knew that the people coming there were coming for sexual purposes, and he wanted to hurt these people and just cause them misery, cause them any kind of problem he would just love to do.
As Bellfield continued to roam the local suburbs, police would make a breakthrough in the Twickenham murder of Amélie de Lagrange. The perpetrator had made a mistake.
Her mobile phone had departed from the network about 20 minutes after she'd been found, and that the location of the mobile phone was in Walton-on-Thames. And that immediately said to us that whoever had taken that phone from Amélie had used a vehicle, because it just wouldn't be possible to make that journey in the time that was allowed. It was almost certain that the murderer had taken her phone from Twickenham Green to Walton-on-Thames.
Police scoured over 2,000 hours of footage. One vehicle would eventually grab their attention.
We were able to identify that it was probably a Ford, which sounded good until we realised that probably gave us 25,000 vans to eliminate.
Following an appeal to the public, one local resident was filled with a terrible sense of foreboding.
It's like someone had got ice water and dripped it all down my spine.
Johanna Collins felt compelled to file a report.
I walked in and I said, I'm here about, I think I know who did it. And they, usual response, oh, why do you think that, and this and that? And I turned and I said, well, I think it's my ex. He's a wheel clamper and drives a white van.
Levi Bellfield was now on the Metropolitan Police's radar. Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton began to dig deeper.
Started looking at the intelligence file on Levi Bellfield, which was quite thick, although he didn't have very many convictions. And while I was looking through, it said that in May 2004 he'd been arrested in a white Toyota Previa, which I knew to be a people carrier.
The vehicle in question matched the description of the car that had mowed down Kate Sheedy in Isleworth.
And that was when it occurred to me, actually this becomes very interesting now, because if we've got somebody who's got a white van and a people carrier, then he could really be the person we're looking for.
A third car connection was then discovered from the Hampton killing in 2003. The silver Vauxhall Corsa was also owned by Bellfield. The police now believed they had enough evidence to take Bellfield in.
The decision was made that we ought to arrest him. We went to his house early one morning on the 20th of November 2004.
On hearing the police, Bellfield had made a last-ditch attempt to evade capture.
The sergeant, however, decides to go into the attic. Hole in the ceiling, pushes the thing up, climbs up a ladder, and it's one of those attics of which has been insulated, obviously, heat saving. And he discovers Bellfield hiding, wearing no clothes at all, like a big lump. And the sergeant gets him up and says, "You're nicked."
As Bellfield was taken into custody, it soon became clear to detectives that the picturesque suburbs could have suffered further at the hands of the club doorman.
When the police arrested Levi Bellfield, it immediately became apparent that this man had done a lot more damage than we'd previously thought.
At one stage we had 27 investigations going into either murder, serious assault or rape. We learnt never to be surprised by what we found out about Levi Bellfield, because some of the things that people told us he'd got up to were just unbelievable.
Overwhelmed by these new developments, police focused their efforts on the suspected killings. Surveillance was analysed, allowing detectives to formulate a theory on how Bellfield had stalked his prey.
You can see that the buses are all well lit inside. It's relatively easy for anybody from the outside to see passengers, whether they're male or female, whether they're on their own. We're pretty sure that Levi Bellfield was using that ability to see inside to assist him to pick his victims.
The chosen victims were all young, a profile that appeared to match Bellfield's inappropriate taste.
Oh, Levi had always had a thing about schoolgirls. When you'd be driving down the road, it'd be the things he used to say to some of them. You just wanted to die when you were sat next to him. You think, if he's saying that with me in the car, what's he saying and doing when you're not in the car?
I think he did like preying on young girls. And it's the people who seem somehow beyond his reach, in other words, a kind of rather more virginal schoolgirl, very, if you like, middle class, whom he might not have thought would be within his command. I think he was very angry with them.
Police would develop a clearer picture of Bellfield by drawing on witness statements from current and former partners.
Johanna is a formidable lady. You know, that's in some ways surprising because she's not the kind of person you would imagine to be easily to become a victim. And yet she tells of real and absolute terror in her time as Levi's partner.
He'd never punch you in the face. He'd always punch your body and your legs because obviously you can cover those up. You weren't allowed to cry or make a noise because if you did, you got hit harder. And if you had a bruise, he used to get great pleasure out of keep poking the bruise and like hitting you on the same bruise.
He developed an incredibly abusive attitude towards women as a whole. They had to do what he wanted or they weren't worth anything. They had to be one of mine. He would almost brand them and force them to conduct themselves. I mean, he abused women in the most dreadful way.
The location of Johanna's house in the affluent suburb of Strawberry Hill would prove to be an ideal location for the predatory Bellfield.
We had a long alleyway behind our house, so if you sort of entered it by the station, and once you were in it for a good mile. That was one of his hunting grounds. This is when I found the rape kit in my garage. It was a black bin liner, and it had one of my dad's old big donkey jackets in it. There was a big kitchen knife, a balaclava, and, like a magazine. And when you went through it, all the blondes, he'd stabbed and slashed all the pictures of them, the faces.
This apparent hatred for blonde women appeared to match the profiles of the victims in southwest London. As the evidence mounted, the Metropolitan Police formally charged Levi Bellfield on March the 2nd, 2006.
I had the pleasure of standing across the table to Levi Bellfield and actually formally charging him with these murders and looking him in the eye while I did it. And the thing is that his eyes are incredibly cold. There isn't a flicker, they're very, very dark. And there wasn't a flicker of emotion. He just looked at me as I charged it and said, "Not guilty."
Bellfield would stand trial at the Old Bailey in 2007. He was charged with the murders of Marsha McDonnell and Amélie de Lagrange and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy.
I was sitting in fairly close proximity to Bellfield, and I couldn't help but being struck about how disinterested he seemed to be. He spent a lot of time staring at the ceiling, looking at his fingernails, kind of yawning. You couldn't tell if he was play acting or if this was a genuine effect on him, but it almost seemed to be that he found the whole procedure tiresome.
Bellfield presents this absolutely blameless face. He pretends to the jury that he's butter wouldn't melt in his mouth. He's very quiet, well-spoken, always presents well.
He denied everything, but in fact, of course, it cut no ice with the jury at all.
He said, "I'm fighting for my life here." And the instant he said that, I looked at the jury, I looked at the judge, and I think all of us realised that The unsaid part of that was, well, that was more than Amélie or Marsha had the chance to do.
On the 25th of February 2008, Levi Bellfield was found guilty of 2 murders and 1 attempted murder.
Bellfield offered no explanation whatever. He simply accepted a whole life tariff from the judge and went off to his cell.
The sentence handed out effectively recommended that he should never be released. Although Bellfield was finally off the streets, another horrific chapter to the killer's tale would be revealed.
I was looking through his intelligence file and just happened to see that he lived in Walton in 2002, and I thought, well, hang on, that's the time that Millie Dowler went missing. Looked into the A to Z to see where the place was, and realised that Collingwood Place, where he lived, was literally 20 yards from where she's last seen.
Levi Bellfield was now the prime suspect in a murder case that had baffled police for the past 6 years. In February 2008, convicted killer Levi Bellfield was named as prime suspect in the murder of 13-year-old schoolgirl Millie Dowler. Investigators had discovered that he had access to an apartment in Walton-on-Thames, adjacent to the scene of Millie's disappearance 6 years earlier. On the 21st of March 2002, Levi Bellfield left a house in West Drayton, driving his partner's car.
He loved to exist on the fringe, on the edge. And that's why he took to driving around in cars all the time, always looking out for, quotes, prey or whatever it might be.
Just 20 minutes drive away was Walton-on-Thames. Millie Dowler would arrive at the train station that same afternoon. She was last seen waving off a friend from a bus stop near Collingwood Place.
Within 10 or 12 minutes of Millie last being seen, the CCTV camera on the building across the road shows the Daewoo Nexia being driven out of Collingwood Place and turning left.
The driver of the car was Levi Bellfield. As a frequent visitor to Collingwood Place, his local knowledge would offer up a perfect opportunity to act.
Right beside the bus stop is a small hole in a very high hedge.
It's quite clear to me that on that day, Bellfield must have been on the other side of the hedge. Perhaps he was walking through the gap, but he saw Millie Dowler standing at the bus stop.
And I suspect that he beckoned Millie Dowler across the road to avoid appearing before the CCTV cameras. At that point, he took her into 24 Collingwood Place and killed her.
As the evidence mounted, Bellfield would finally stand trial in May 2011, 9 years after Millie Dowler's murder. Ex-girlfriend Johanna Collings would appear as a witness.
I know everyone else had gone behind a screen, and I refused to have a screen or do it video link because I'm not hiding. I've got no need to hide. And it antagonised, it annoyed him. He just sat glaring, rocking.
The jury would find Bellfield guilty of murder.
The headline in one of the papers the day after his conviction was 4 words. It was, "He killed Millie too."
7 weeks after the trial began, Bellfield was sentenced to a second whole life term.
He yawns when he's found guilty. I was sitting there watching him. You know, barely an emotion crossed his face.
We already know that Bellfield wants to appear powerful. So in court, he's not going to show any emotion that indicates he's weak or vulnerable, but he truly could believe that he's above it all, that he's untouchable.
The suburbs of southwest London finally had some closure on Bellfield's reign of terror. However, he had offered no admission of guilt or explanation for his heinous crimes.
We don't know why he killed Amélie, why he killed Marsha, why he ran Kate Sheedy over. But the suggestion is that these were actually attempts to shut women up from his vehicle that failed.
If you wanted to explain Bellfield in one sentence, is that he has an enormous amount of inadequacy and self-loathing that he has tried to compensate for by being cruel to others and make them suffer in some way, was gratifying for Bellfield.
But was the extreme violence dealt by this sadistic killer the result of a troubled life, or was he born to kill?
The definition sociopath may well have been written to describe Bellfield. He has no connection with the rest of the human race emotionally. He has no empathy, he has no sympathy. He took lives like that. He would simply snuff people out. You don't develop those instincts. There has to be something that you're born with that begins that process.
He was bullied as a kid, he was ridiculed and humiliated, and that type of anger just stays within individuals. Sometimes they kill themselves. In Bellfield's case, he acted outward. He externalized his anger.
I don't think he was born to kill, no. I think it stems from his background. Lots of things happened to him in his childhood that could have made him resent life and go out and do what he did.
He was born to be bad. He was born to be so bad that it was inevitable he was going to kill, I would say.
Levi Bellfield currently resides in Her Majesty's Prison, Wakefield. His continuing veil of silence adds further torment to the loved ones of those young women who lost their lives.
Why? Tell me why you did it. There must be a reason. Even just for the families to put their minds at rest.
It seemed so undeserved. They were just the epitome of innocent young women, you know, taken in the prime of life for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Bellfield's heinous crimes will eventually fade away, but the memories of Amélie de Lagrange, Marsha MacDonald and Millie Dowler will live on.
My opinion of the man is more or less the same as it always has been. He's a bully, he's got his just deserve, and if he can live with that, well, that's his problem.